Hi, I'm Ahnaf Alvi. I am a third year PhD student at Texas A&M University. So I'll be presenting my recent work, um, which is on a deep Gaussian process using Prior, and it is on doing multi-task prediction for high entropy alloy properties. And first of all, thank you for inviting me to the talk. And this work has been done in collaboration with Los Alamos National Lab and Max Planck Institute. And yeah, these are all my collaborators. So just to start off, the main motivation behind this work is we want to co-design materials and process parameters together, because the performance of the material is influenced by the composition as well as the process parameters. As you can see, for like additive manufacturing, you can have different forms of uh, defect based on your process parameters as well as the composition. So it's really important to design the process parameters as well as the composition together, and that's a hard problem. And you can also see that if we only consider material complexity, then the amount of space we can access in the performance regime is lower than, like, if we also want to optimize the process parameters as well. So that's the main motivation behind it. But to do this, as we know, so first of all, some stuff about HEA. It's a compositionally complex alloy, and it can have multiple different elements inside it, and they can vary throughout the range from 0% to 100%. So we can have a really large number of compositions in our design space, and that's a problem because we have finite amount of resource to investigate the design space and to try out each composition. And their property landscape is also not that trivial. As you can see here in the density diagram, it's not that trivial. And also, these are UMAPs where you can project a simplex, high dimensional simplex on a two-dimensional plane. So each of the corners are the pure elements, or like this corner is vanadium rich, this corner is titanium rich, and this is like the same points colored by the density. And as you can see, the density landscape is not trivial for the high entropy alloys. So the problem is we are trying to find uh, the correct composition that will yield our desired properties and performance, as well as we are trying to find the process parameters as well for each of the compositions. So it's a really high dimensional space in that regard. And also the material performance is it spans multiple spatio-temporal scale, as you can see, and we can investigate this through different methods, and each method can range to being expensive to cheap. For example, we can do the experiment itself and get the performance, or we can do different simulations at different spatial and temporal scale, which have different levels of resource intensiveness to it. For example, you can do Abyssinian simulations, which are also called DFT, and then atomistics or continuum simulation. And we can also use machine learning methods, but they are not mutually exclusive. We may need to do multiple of them at many steps, and we may need to consider properties from all these different simulations for optimizing our performance. So the thing is, we have all these different properties that we need to consider, and they vary with respect to the resource they consume. And also we have a really high dimensional design space that we need to um, investigate, and we can't just take all points. For example, for a 5-component HEA with 6.5% or 6.25% resolution, it uh, it results in around 60,000 compositions, and that's a very big space to investigate. And we can't simulate or uh, experiment with all the compositions. And then if you add the process parameters on top of it, like let's say we have 3 process parameters for each of the compositions, then it will even explode further in terms of design points. So one way to do this is high throughput experimentation or automated experimentation, where it goes on a loop, where the machine kind of plans on which compositions and process parameters to try out sequentially. And in that case, what our current work is concerned about is the planning phase of these automated experimentation. And for all these loops in planning, uh, we would need a surrogate that kind of models the landscape, which is the relationship between the process. Is there a question?
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, so the surrogate should be able to model the relationship between all our inputs, which are compositions and process parameters, and multiple properties, because in most cases we are doing multi-objective optimization for different engineering performances. So for planning, we need that surrogate. And to choose the actions on the surrogate, by action, I mean what are the next steps would be, what would be the next compositions or process parameters. We would also need some form of acquisition function if we are talking about, if we are talking in Bayesian optimization terms. But in a more general sense, you need a surrogate and you need something to choose the actions. In BO sense or Bayesian optimization sense, these are the surrogates and the acquisition function. And the surrogate should be able to quantify what it knows so far from all the experiments that it has done. And it would be in the form of the mean prediction of the surrogate. And it should be also able to quantify what it doesn't know or is not sure about in the landscape from whatever experiment it has done so far, in the form of uncertainty quantification. So you want your surrogate to give mean predictions as well as the standard deviation or different forms of uncertainty. So that is what needed for planning the different experiments in automated experimentation setup. And there can be different forms of surrogate, and they may range from having less parameters and to more parameters. So GPs, different kinds of GPs are mostly used in BO because they are uh, non-parametric to some extent. So the more data you add as you go through your experimentation loop, it kind of scales the parameter based on that. And as you can see, from going from less parameter to a more to a model having more parameters, you uh, kind of lose the sample efficiency. By sample efficiency, what I mean is how much the model can learn about the landscape while having a low number of data. So if you have more parameters, you would mathematically need more data points, more experiments to have a good predictions. So there are different more surrogates, GP, multitask GP, then the deep GP that we are talking about right now, then Bayesian neural network, encoder-decoder, all other neural network based models. This is not exactly a definitive like sequence of models. Uh, you can obviously model an encoder decoder that has a less number of models than say BNN or something. But in most cases, this is in one single problem, this is how mostly the hierarchy of the different models looks like. And we are very interested in DeepGP because it's a less explored surrogate in terms of having in terms of doing the Bayesian optimization setup. Also, it kind of falls in the middle in terms of the sample efficiency and number of parameters. But as I said, it's not exactly definitive, but it is mostly how it looks like. And also, the use of parameters depends on what is your input dimension and output dimension. And if you combine chemical composition dimension and process parameter dimension, then it becomes somewhere in the number of dimensions becomes somewhat intermediate. So that's another reasoning for us to go for deep GP, as the models like BNN and Encoder-Decoder, they are good for even more, uh, even higher dimensions, and GP and multitask GP may struggle with higher dimensions. So apart from the different types of surrogates, then we can also discuss like what are the features of a good surrogate. So as you have seen that we have different forms of surrogate, so it would be really good if we could combine like different parametric and non-parametric surrogates in a hybrid manner. And also our surrogate should be able to quantify uncertainty. And for GPs, the good thing is that it can quantify the uncertainty in a native way where you get the uncertainty out of it anyway, rather than doing some kind of sampling over the different parameters of the model. And um, it should be able to model multiple properties as well, because in most of the cases in material science problems, we have multiple properties and we would want to do multi-objective optimization anyway for engineering um, engineering cases. And it would be good if it can exploit the correlation between the multiple properties, because as we all know that all the different properties of materials, they kind of comes from a similar physics. And it sh- it should be a case that they have um, some form of correlation in between the properties, as they are kind of originating from the same physics. And also in case of doing automated experimentation, it should be able to handle heterotopic data. By heterotopic data, what I mean is, as we have multiple properties, so for each design points, let's say we are doing an experiment that returns three properties, and it may happen that for that design point, you may be able to calculate two of the properties, but the third one is missing. That is called heterotopic data. It can happen for experimental cases or other cases. Also, for the different objectives, you may have different levels of cost of doing those experiments for each of the properties. So you may not want to do you may not want to calculate all the properties at once. So in that case, the model should be able to handle that type of data. So this is not an exhaustive list, but there can be many other properties, but these are something that would be necessary for a good surrogate for automated experimentation. So to achieve these different features of a good surrogate, we uh, wanted to propose this method where we are trying to combine parametric and a semi-parametric model to get the surrogate. Because if you have like all these models, why not try to leverage all of them or some of them? So we use a encoder decoder based prior, and the encoder decoder is of over complete architecture, and we use that with the deep Gaussian process to model our uh, al- to model from alloy compositions to alloy properties. In this case, we are not doing like composition plus process uh, as our design space, but what we are doing here is compositions and alloy properties, but having compositions and process parameters would be the next step in this work. So we are using like a highly parameterized model with our deep Gaussian process to get estimates of mean and uncertainty quantification, because it would be a lot harder to get the uncertainty quantification from the encoder-decoder model by sampling and dropouts and stuff like that. But the deep Gaussian process can like natively give you the uncertainty quantification. So this is our um, main model that we tried, and we compared it against other models that I will discuss further. So just to talk about how the experimentation, all the data were collected, and it's a continuing loop. So we have some data, and now here we are using Deep GP to do further iterations of the experiments. So the so we what we did is we did the high throughput screening on our design space, and then the materials were made using vacuum arc melting, and then uh, different experimentations were done with it, like as you can see, SCM, ETS, EPST, for verification of the compositions and like the microstructure. And then in terms of characterization, we did tensile tests, nano indentation, and many different other tests. And it was the experimentation was done in a like federated way, where the different experimental groups are situated at different parts of USA. Some are from Georgia Tech, some are from, I guess, John Hopkins, and there are some other people from some other universities. So we would um, make the recommendations, and then um, it would be made in one university, and then the samples would be shipped out to all the other universities, and then the different experimental groups would do different forms of characterization, and then we would get the data back, and then we would do the recommendations from the next iteration. And it was done in a batch manner. What I mean by that is, for each iteration we had multiple recommendations which were done at once. And we were also like it there were a unified portal where all these things were managed, and so that we can keep track where the sample is, in which university, or whoever is working on it, or whether we got the data back from that experimental group. So it was, as I said, it was done in a distributed manner, and it is also being done in a distributed manner right now, involving many experimental groups. So this is how the initial data is generated, and this is how it is going on even right now. And so for whatever data we had, this is a pair plot of showing like what kind of correlation there are in between the properties. For example, you can see that elongation has some correlation with UTS by yield strength. By UTS, I mean ultimate tensile strength, and YS is yield strength. And there are some other forms of correlation as well. For example, hardness and yield strength is correlated, as we may uh, anticipate. And there are like other correlations, UTS by yield strength with two yield strength, that's uh, predictable, because this UTS by yield strength has yield strength in it. So there are different forms of correlations in between all the different properties that we are interested in. So we want to leverage that, as I said. And in terms, this is a barycentric plot of like all the different compositions we had in our design space, and wherever we have did experiments so far, and the data that we use for the model. And then we worked and compared with different models. There were, by HDGP, it means heterotopic deep Gaussian process that is able to handle heterotopic data. By P or NP, it means either it has the encoder decoder prior, or it doesn't have have the encoder-decoder prior. And by all or main, it means that it is either modeling all the different tasks that are available to us, or it is only modeling the main task. By main, we mean the only the main objectives that we are interested in. Then we also did a normal Gaussian process and a XGBoost and the encoder-decoder model itself, which is being used as the prior. So these are all the models, and then uh, this is kind of like the train the test metrics for the different properties. We have 11 properties in total. As you can see, we had Varvilian yield strength prediction. This is a computational prediction, then SFE, then SFE is stacking fault energy, then valence electron concentration. These three are computational because they are related to all the mechanical properties that we are interested in. Then we did yield strength, UTS by yield strength, elongation, hardness, modulus, average hardness dynamic by hardness quasi-static. So this is a hardness test, and this can be tested in a dynamic way and a quasi-static way, and this is the ratio in between them. Then also depth of penetration for each of those compositions, and we used RMSE, MAE, R squared, Spearman, and SMAP as our metric. And so as you can see here, there are all the different models that I just talked about. And then we found that uh, like in terms of counting the properties where it outperformed, the best performing model was the one model which had prior and was taking into account all the different tasks. But it was closely followed by the deep GP with prior using only the main tasks. So, uh, in a more holistic way, we can say that prior was defining factor in this, and then there was some like uh, difference in performance based on whether we are trying to model all tasks or only the main task. And followed by these two models were the other deep GP models and encoder-decoder model, and then we had the normal GP and the XGBoost. And we did it for 5 random split over the data. And because the number of data points for each of the properties is not same. For example, we had 133 data points for yield strength, but for depth of penetration or average hardness dynamic, it was only 50 data points. So there is like huge asymmetry at the number of data point for different tasks. So each of the models are getting those different numbers of data points. And sorry, then we used Spearman rank because for Bayesian optimization or optimization of the composition, it's just what really matters is whether we are getting the ranking of the different compositions right rather than the value right. And we can also see that for Spearman rank coefficient, uh, it is also better in case of deep GPUs with prior. So these are some parity plots for the best performing model that we choose. And as you can see, except for the 3 computational properties. Now, there's one fact that for these 3 computational properties, which are Varvilian yield strength, SFE, and VC, we did not have prior. So this model is only getting prior for the other 8 properties, but for these 3 computational models, we are not getting any prior. So I would assume if we can have those 3 priors as well, it may perform better because as you can see for this case, uh, these 3 tasks with no prior are um, the other models has better performance than our best performing model, sorry, which is the deep GP with prior and all tasks. So that's one thing, we don't have prior for these uh, 3 tasks. And other than that, we have prior for the other tasks. So uh, other than that, these are the other three properties that I couldn't fit in this slide because there are 11. And then, as you can see, this is a difference um, for hardness. I'm just showing like what is the difference that you can see in terms of having prior and having no prior. This is the deep GP model with no prior and all tasks, and this is the deep GP model with prior and all tasks. As you can see that using the encoder-decoder prior, the points that are at like the edge of your bound, or even the points inside it is much closer to the actual value than using no prior. So prior helps a lot in terms of the prediction. Is there a question?
Yeah, one question there.
Yeah,
So I see that on the left plot you have a red dots and a blue dot, which is like train and test.
yeah.
Then on the right side there are two blue, which means that yeah, they're trained.
there's there's another test set that you can see. It's
Okay.
really at the edge, and that's not like uh
Yeah.
is visible here. So yes, but these are not exactly same because we are doing random split because we don't have the asymmetry in the data. So that's why we couldn't match like exact uh, points to be in the test set. But the other points that is on the actual corner, that is the test set.
Okay.
And sorry, and the split with as I said, we did 5 splits. So as we cycle through all the 5 splits, the test points would be at different locations uh, of our design space. And so as you can see here in our metrics, we reported the mean of our predictions, and then also what would be the like uncertainty bound of our predictions, as you can see. So that is reported for all the models, the mean and the uncertainty bound over all those 5 splits. Was that the question, or is there like
Yep.
something?
Yeah, that was the question. Thanks.
So just to show you, as you can see, like the ultimate point here is the one that is also in test set.
Okay, got it.
Sorry, keep on doing this. Okay, uh, so in conclusion, we tried to propose a model, prior infused deep GP, which can be used for Bayesian optimization in subsequent iteration of automated experimentation. Uh, And this model is capable of integrating neural network models with high parameter count along with probabilistic deep GP models so that we can kind of have the best of both worlds. And it is also capable of answering quantification and predicting all the tasks at once and can handle the heterotropic data. And also in terms of the performance in this specific case, we saw that it outperformed the conventional GPS or the models without prior on this experimental data set. So that was all that I had. This is the associated preprint with it, and this whole work is under review. It's not peer review yet. And if you guys have any interest, then you can check this out in archive. Other than that, if there's any other questions, comments, or concerns.
Thank you so much. Yeah, if you have any questions, please just write in the chat. I have one on the like the main architecture. If you can go back to where you had the two separate models. Yes, right there. So whenever you have a prior, then you would first train the encoder-decoder, and then you would add the deep Gaussian process for the
So,
experimental data.
so the way it works is it kind of models a mismatch. So you uh, train the encoder-decoder model on the alloy compositions and the alloy properties, and then you take the prediction from the encoder-decoder model, you
Ah,
subs you subtract it from your actual data, then you get the mismatch, right, from your encoder-decoder prediction and your actual data. Then you would model that mismatch with the deep Gaussian process. And for calculating the metrics with the hybrid models, we made sure that the train and test set is same for the encoder decoder model and the deep Gaussian processes, so that there's no like data leakage or something.
okay, yeah, yeah, okay, that's pretty clear. And for the architecture itself of the encoder decoder, is it just feed forwards or anything fancy?
As far as I know, it is feed forward. So the encoder decoder model was trained by Vahid Attari, who is one of the authors of this work. And as far as I understand, it's feed forward with the over complete architecture, where it's like it uh, it diverges to a higher number of neurons at the middle, and then from there on, it converges again in the decoder.
Okay, yeah, yeah, yeah. And since you don't need alloy properties to train that encoder decoder, do you use like a bigger data sets than just the training data set that you actually have?
No, it
Yeah.
uses the same alloy
That's
properties. As I said, we kept the train and test set for both of the models same. We kept them fixed. And so the encoder decoder prior uses the same alloy compositions and same alloy properties, the same number of them, and that then get the predictions. And then we use that. Then we model the mismatch between that prediction and the actual alloy properties, because for all of the properties uh, it can't reach the actual properties only with the encoder decoder model. And for that exact encoder decoder model, we also reported the different metrics. As you can see, that's over here.
okay, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, that's pretty clear. I don't have any more questions, and I don't see any questions in the chat. So yeah, again, thank you so much for presenting.
Thank you.
We'll upload the recording to YouTube, and yeah, we have like these webinars every week. So if you're interested, just yeah, follow
Yeah,
up.
sure. Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah,
Thank
no
you.
worries. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.